All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fort Worth Music Academy podcast. I am your host, Eric Barassa, and I am so excited to have on my good friend and fellow music school owner, Mr. Josh Ross. What's up, dude?
Hey.
Okay, so for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your music school.
Fantastic. So again, my name is Josh Ross. I own the J-Ro School of Music in Troy, Michigan. And I just love music so much. And music just made a huge impact in my life. I was definitely very shy growing up. But as I started getting into music and I started to see that it was something that I could do with other people, it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so I just poured headlong into it. And especially when I was 13 years old, I started teaching music, actually. I remember putting up little flyers at the local ice cream shop and started getting students. And it was just something I just loved doing. And I just loved seeing the impact that music was making. And of course, I loved performing, just everything about music. And, you know, the older I got, the more I was like, this is just the best thing ever. And I just I've experienced this inner transformation, and this has given me this purpose for life. And I just want to share this with other people. And so that's what inspired me to start this music school, J-Ro School of Music. It started with just guitar, but now we do piano, voice, guitar. We do some bass and ukulele as well. We just don't promote those. But yeah, it's just been an incredible journey being able to go from this 13-year-old kid who's teaching guitar out of his parents' house to now having my own studio location and having a wonderful community of students and teachers who love music at least somewhat as much as I do.
Yeah, man. You and I have a very similar journey. Like, you almost described my own process there. So that's great. What and of course, for those who don't know, I lived in Michigan for 6 years, and so anyone who's watching the video right now hopefully can resonate with my jealousy of just, I know what September is like in Michigan. And so seeing your background, where you are outside, dude, there is nothing like this time of year in Michigan. And I miss it because fall doesn't really start here in Texas until like November. So, okay, well, cool. And how long have you been running your music school?
Depends on how you consider it. Like, you know, if you consider since I was 13 as one thing, but I would say I graduated college in 2013, and right out the gate, I was started to launch this school. Now, I was living in Ann Arbor at the time, and so I moved back home actually to Troy, Michigan, and was running it out of my mom's house. And then around 2014, 2015, got to the point where I was ready to get married, and I had some money saved up, so I bought a house. And then my wife moved in after we got married, so then I started teaching there, again, still in Troy, Michigan. And then we got to the point where in around 2016, 2017, where I was starting to have so many students, that the neighbors were starting to complain. We were having like 70 students come in every week.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what that's like.
It was just a mess, but it was awesome. It was great. And then eventually, finally, like near the end of 2017, the city of Troy came and like, you guys, you have 2 weeks to find a place.
I was going to ask you, what was the breaking point for you where you find, so it was the city came in and said, you got to get a commercial location.
That was basically it. Well, and frankly, it wasn't like I was so surprised. I mean, I'd been passively looking for a location for the last 2 years. Since 2015, 2017. So it wasn't like I was completely like, oh, but, it was great that I knew what I was looking for. And then shortly after, the city of Troy coming over, we just found this magical place that had just been sitting vacant for 7 months. And it just I literally think it was just made to be a music school. Like, it was already set up. I didn't have to do any construction. I literally got the keys. The next day I opened the keys and sent vacuumed it all up and then had my students come in.
How long, from the time you started looking for that, you had to find something, how long did it take you to find this place?
It's a good question. Well, I think actually that we found, I think we may have actually found it either right before this 2-week period or right after. It was like right in that period.
Yeah.
But it was just very clear that, I walked in, I looked at a number of places. I literally walked into this place and it was like, this is it. It was just obvious.
So for me, it was, we had a student who was roughhousing with my dog in the backyard. And my dog was the sweetest dog, but somehow she ended up tearing up his shirt. And I was like, okay,
Ooh.
this kid obviously instigated this, because that is not the norm for my dog. But it was at that point where, and then a student ran over something in one of the neighbors' yards, and when they were trying to back out, and I was like, okay, it's time. And within like a week, I found a space right down the street from my house that I was like, this is it. It was the only spot I looked at, and we've been there ever since.
Well, yeah. It was a similar thing. It's like when you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know what is really interesting? I saw a YouTube video not that long ago on the power of trusting our gut, trusting our instinct. And for you and I, for everything we have learned. So for those who don't know, Josh and I were in a music school owner, guitar teaching, business mentorship program together for years. And we learned all these techniques. We had read all these books and stuff. And over time, I think we both just realized the power of listening to ourselves. And it's important to get advice and learn from people who are smarter than us. But you, at the end of the day, you kind of know inside what's right and what's not. And even if you can't put words on like, this is why I'm doing the thing, you just know you have to do the thing. And it's just a part of who you are, and you can't explain it. And I've learned slowly over the years, more and more the importance of listening to that voice. So I guess let's kind of segue into that. What's that journey been like for you? You've learned from a lot of different people and a lot of different books and resources. And how have you balanced that with just learning how to listen to that inner voice?
Fantastic question. Well, I think that, learning to run a music school is very much like learning to just play a musical instrument. I believe the same is true. Like, obviously, like you can learn to play music without a teacher. You can go on YouTube and all this, but what having a teacher does is it helps you, it gives you accountability, it gives you a program, but ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual student has to go beyond just listening to what the teacher says, and there has to be this inner gut where they just trust themselves. And I think the students who struggle the most, who they can't trust themselves. Like they always need to know like this, what's the secret sauce? What's the secret sauce? How do I do it? And it's like, well, the secret is that there is no secret. I mean, there are definitely techniques, there are ways to play the guitar.
Yes, for those who haven't heard it, see my my recent podcast from 2 weeks ago about how there are no secrets. Yeah, right on.
And it's just the truth, because yes, there are certain ways to do it. There are better ways of playing the guitar. But at the end of the day, while it can be very helpful to learn from a book, helpful to learn from a person, at the end of the day, no matter how much instruction you get, I find that you have to you can't completely avoid trial and error. You still have to try, you have to experiment, you have to make little adjustments. I tell my students all the time, like, look, like I can tell you where to put your hands, but at the end of the day, it's going to take you little adjustments to get, if I'm playing guitar, it's precisely where to place my hands so I don't get that buzzing sound, right? Like part of it is it's little minute, like millimeter movements.
And you can say all you want, like make this adjustment, but the student just has to play. And sometimes that's what I tell students. I'm like, you just have to let your fingers experiment and move and make these tiny adjustments. And over time, they'll kind of figure out what's right. And I think it's exactly the same with anything in life, including running a business and running a music school.
Exactly. So I'm really thankful that, when I was really going full time in this in 2014, I joined the music community and I got a lot of instruction and whatnot. But I think and I still read a lot. I still always want to learn, but I think over time, what I've learned is I've learned to really trust myself. And I think ultimately come down to what my values are. Because sometimes what happens is someone gives you advice, and someone who might be smarter than you further along, but what you might realize is the reason that advice doesn't work for you is not because the advice is not right, but because maybe that's not important to you, or that doesn't align with your value system.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so
totally.
So like, for example, like someone could say, oh, here's all these ways to make more money in your business. Sure. Okay. That might actually be true, but maybe some of those things might go against my value system. Or maybe, maybe to me, it's more important to spend time with my family and not worry about how fast the business is growing. Right. So I think that, part of it is being able to know when someone is giving advice, it might be just wrong. It might be right. It might be kind of right, but you ultimately have to adjust it and determine to what extent that fits in with your priorities. Like I could tell my students, yeah, if you practice 3 hours a day, yeah, you're going to make all this progress. But you know what? To them, it might not be a priority to practice 3 hours a day because they have other things that are more important, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
totally okay.
Yeah. And you totally have to listen to yourself and your personality, because I've read some books and studied with some mentors who are very intense people. And like, I'm kind of intense when I get in the zone, but I also know my limits. And these people who write these books and who have achieved all this success and they're just rich as heck, it's like, and for the record, pretty much all of us in America are in the top 1% of people in the world. So that's, we probably shouldn't get on that soapbox right now. But so when I say rich, I don't mean like rich compared to the world. I mean like rich compared to the average American. These people, when you start to kind of study their lives, they're really intense people, and they'll work 12 to 16 hours a day on their business. And I had to finally just accept over time that I've tried to make myself that kind of person, but it's just not who I am. It's not who I am. And so I have had to adjust and say, how much can I accomplish within this window of time each day? Otherwise I go a little insane and I become this monster of a human being. It just doesn't work for me.
Well, it's funny because like earlier on, like it seemed like almost like entrepreneurs would like talk about how great it is to work 12 or 14 or 16 hours in your business. Like they should win some type of award. And frankly, like if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. But what I found is it's actually not necessary to do that, you know, unless you have some crazy ambitious goals and you just want to. But what I found is actually by working fewer hours and creating restraints, limits, it's actually forced me to become more productive and smarter and more creative with the time that I have. And then my family benefits because then I get to spend more time, and which then it gives me even more energy for my business because my family is getting loved, they're getting the attention that they need, and then I'm feeling energized. So now I have more when I am giving this time to my business to be more focused on top of it and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And most people, when they say like, oh, I worked a 12, 14-hour day today, like I'm not impressed by it anymore, because I always start thinking like, okay, what did you actually accomplish during that time? Because I'd be willing to bet when I only had this 4-hour window and I knew I only had so much I could get done, I had to be so focused. I've had those days where I work 12, 14 hours and like, I don't accomplish very much more than in the 4 to 6 hour days.
Well, that was the truth. And frankly, I think the Corona crisis made that like blatantly clear to me. Like, you know, I think because of all that happened with the coronavirus, it really gave me a wonderful opportunity to really reflect and completely, you know, pull out my schedule and revamp it completely. And I really realized the importance of like, yeah, not just working all the time and just like condensing things into now. And again, I think each person has to determine what works best for them. Like some people might just like working 2 hours at a time, like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours. You know, some people might like doing the whole 12, 14-hour day. What I found is I like having most of my day and then, you know, okay, here's my, like you said, 4 to 6 hour block that I'm going to be really focused. And that's when I'm going to be teaching or doing some administration work. And sure, maybe I might send an email or something really quick during the day, but it's nice to actually have, you know, the day to spend with my family.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, and with my kids starting Zoom school, virtual learning tomorrow is when they start school. I'm rearranging my schedule. I was going to my office about 7 a.m. every day and then coming home earlier. Well, now I'm going to spend the mornings with them, helping my wife do their schoolwork. And then I'm going to go to work later. So because Xavier's how old right now?
He is 15 months.
Yeah. So when I had Madison and she was our only kid and she was a baby, I was spending the early parts of the day at home and then going to work later. And now it's kind of the opposite. So it'll be interesting to kind of have that shift for me to do that. Let me ask you this question. Here's one of the challenges I find as an entrepreneur is that once I get started on something, and I start a project, I start thinking about it, it's really hard for me to disconnect from it. It's hard for me to not think about it. So even when I do come home and I say, now it's family time, I'm still thinking about that thing. And that's one of my great challenges as an entrepreneur is I don't want to work all day, but I have a hard time not constantly thinking about it. What is that like for you?
I know exactly what that feels like, and I don't have some
I figured you
perfect.
would.
I don't have some one size fit all solution, but that's precisely the same thing. Because sometimes my wife's like, okay, Josh, you're here more now, but you're still not fully present. And what I find is, I think trying to tell myself stop thinking about it is like trying to tell yourself stop thinking about a pink elephant. It doesn't really help. So what I find, what can help is if either internally I recognize, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. You know what? This is a good idea. It's exciting, and I love it. And I will think about this at this time. Right now, I want to be home and be for my family. So I think like when I embrace the fact that I want to think about this, and then let that feeling fade and like reprioritize, that works really well for me. Or even if I tell Leah, like, hey, Leah, right now I'm feeling like I'm feeling really distracted by these ideas of X. I want to focus on you. Just be aware that I'm kind of like still detoxing my brain from thinking about these thoughts right now. So I think to me, just embracing that that's how I'm feeling internally, and or telling Leah or whomever I'm with that that's what's going on. Because I think that it is part of who we are as entrepreneurs, is that we get excited about our ideas. But I think that it's also on us to grow as entrepreneurs and to have the emotional maturity to know how to navigate from, okay, here's my cool idea, to, okay, if I keep indulging this idea right now, this is going to be selfish. This is not going to be helpful. So, okay, yes, I want to think about this. Cool. Okay, now it's time to be with family. So I don't know if that helps, but when I do those things, it makes it easier for me to be more present.
Yeah, I agree with openly communicating that with your partner and with your family, that just like, hey, I'm having a hard time, disconnecting from this right now. The one thing that I have started to find that I used to exercise in the mornings, and now I've made exercise kind of my buffer between work and home. And it allows me for like that hour at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon to just kind of almost work it all out of my system and wear myself out so much that by the time I get done with my workout and I come home to be with the family, I'm too tired to think about work. Plus, I've had an hour where I'm not at work to kind of decompress from that rather than coming straight home.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, frankly, especially with the whole COVID crisis and Xavier being born, growing up, the gym has been a tough one for me. I've been trying to I sometimes will just exercise like at the end of the day with I'll put Xavier in his crib and I'll like play with him, and I'll be doing push-ups and smiling and laughing at him and finding, little things to do. Like I actually haven't, I did start going to the gym in January and I was so excited. And then like March 15th hit, boom. And so, I obviously haven't been to the gym since then, but now the gyms are reopening. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to the gym or if I'm going to just try to fit exercise in my day. But I'm with you that it is a nice thing that it creates that buffer. I'm still in that, okay, where is this exercise going to fit in? But it is important. Yeah. It's very important, exercise.
And let me ask you, this will kind of lead me into my next question about one thing I had read was when you own a business, instead of trying to separate work and home, maybe this was in the book, The One Thing. I feel like it was in that book, which I think you've read.
Yes.
Yeah. Instead of trying to separate the two aspects of your life, try to combine them. Try to involve your family, involve your children in your business, make them a part of it. And then that way you don't have to separate it so much, and it can just be another aspect of your life. So I don't know if Xavier's old enough or what it's like for you with Leah. What is that like for you? Do you try to separate the two or do you try to combine them?
Good question. I may be totally wrong on this, but I find that, again, if anyone is an employee, I apologize if this does not reflect you. This is not always the case, but I find that generally speaking, oftentimes I think it might be easier for employees, especially clock in, clock out. I don't think this is necessarily true for managers or whatnot, but especially for clock in, clock out type of people who like, here's their specific hours. I think it's a little bit easier in that context to like, here's work, here's home. I think as an entrepreneur, now there are some entrepreneurs who might be good at this. I personally am not one who is. to me, it's like to separate them, it doesn't really make sense to me because it's like they're both part of who I am. So to me, I try to like combine or integrate them to whatever extent because like, yeah, it's like the reality is if my home life sucks, that's going to like seep into my business. And same, if my business is like really causing me a lot of stress, like that's going to seep into my home life. So yeah, I think I try to bring in my wife and my family. However, I found that there was a way to do it that works and a way that doesn't. Like for me, for example, like I think like my fantasy was that Leah was going to like play an active role in my business. Like
Yeah.
she was going to
Ditto.
be, she was going to be like work actively, like, and want to know all the students and you know what I mean? Or whether she did some admin work or teaching, and I quickly discovered that just was not, she had like zero interest in that. And like when I tried to like kind of push it just was not what I found. Leah likes being my life coach. And she's a good life coach, but she likes being like, she likes me presenting what's going on. And then she can kind of be like the advisor, and she can be more thinking strategic level. And then she can kind of, provide that. And I think that's where she likes to help. And along those same lines, she doesn't want me to always be talking about it, but she likes me to present it in that way. So that's the way that she likes to be involved, more on a strategic level. I think some wives might be, or husbands, I guess, if the wife is an entrepreneur, might be better suited, maybe not to help on a strategic level, but maybe just being an encouraging cheerleader. Because like as an entrepreneur, we do need cheerleaders. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's bringing them in and recognizing the specific role that your spouse and your family members can play. Right. Like
Yeah.
my students love seeing Xavier, love, just his very presence. And, as he grows older, we'll see what role he plays. But what I found is not to try to bring Leah into a role that doesn't suit her, rather to give her a role that makes sense.
Agreed. Totally agreed. I had a very similar experience. The other thing I've learned is like not to, and I bet you've probably already learned this too, is to share like different ideas I have with my wife, but not to burden her with the problems or the stressors of what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because I think what was happening, sometimes I was talking about all the problems. And so she started just feeling stressed. And it's like, it really wasn't fair to just unload to her. What I realized is,
that's what we have each other for.
Yeah, exactly. The other entrepreneurs, they get it. So I think with her, I found, to balance it, to talk about the good things that are going on and more or less to kind of involve her in things that just like, so she plays a role like, hey, I'm thinking of bringing this new person on, or, hey, I'm thinking of making this decision, rather than like, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart. Can you help me? You know what I mean? That's, it's like, that's not really the role that she wants to take on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and for my kids, I try to make it just a regular part of their lives that they hang out at the music school. They help me when we have like concerts. Instead of being like, okay, I got to go get set up for this thing, it's like, oh, y'all get in the car. Y'all are gonna help me with this stuff. And they complain and they gripe, but it's good for them. They have these cush lives. They need a little bit of struggle. Okay, let me ask you two final questions that are the yin and yang of the same question before we go. And that is, if you're willing to share, what is the best and worst decision that you've made as an entrepreneur?
Oh my gosh. I've made a lot of bad decisions, that's for sure.
Oh, you and me both.
And in fact, I've probably made more bad decisions than good decisions, but I think, definitely one of my strengths is I usually learn from my mistakes and I admit that I made the mistake. So I'll talk about the bad mistakes first. Gosh, man, it's embarrassing. But I think definitely one of the biggest ones, and it's embarrassing to even admit, was in 2018. So again, I moved into this studio end of 2017. My business is really starting to grow, and now I'm thinking, oh no, I need to bring now all these people on. And for whatever reason, like I'm like got this idea in my mind that I'm just gonna just grow this mammoth company. And so I bring on all these people, most of them not teachers, but marketing people. I bring all these marketing people, and I brought on a couple teachers. So like I hired like 10 people or some crazy number of people, and I was paying them an obscene amount of money. And I didn't have any experience like being like a manager like this on this level. And
it's a totally different ball game, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm like paying all this money out. I don't know how to manage them. I don't know how to like hold them accountable. And of course, to add insult to injury, I don't tell Leah about what I'm doing, or I left out some key details. So like, the company now is like struggling financially, and I'm going into debt and I'm taking out loans, and Leah doesn't know about it. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse until it gets to this point that I'm like, I had like make this major confession to my, to my wife and her family. And I was like, I lied to you and I did the totally wrong thing. And yeah, that was I'd say probably the worst. But I've made some other bad decisions.
That's a good one. That's if it makes you feel any better. So my worst one, this is really embarrassing, which I think you actually know about this one, was our former business mentor gave me some advice, which was anytime you have to fire somebody, you always do it in front of everybody else. And this instinctively went against my gut. Inside, I knew it was wrong, but I thought, okay, this guy's way more successful than me. I need to trust him. And I did that. I fired a teacher in front of the rest of the team, and he's never forgiven me for it. And I understand. And I will never forget it. It's by far the worst decision that I've made in my business. But again, I've made lots of bad decisions, so that's not the only one.
Yeah, but it's the one that definitely sticks out, and it's just like,
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, just like is knowing how to balance when other people give you advice. Maybe it works for them, but you have to ask yourself if it really goes along with your values or not.
Yeah. Eventually you get to a point. Let me ask you this. Did you ever watch the show Last Man Standing with Tim Allen?
I did not.
Okay. It was great because he runs a business with his business partner, and his daughter at one point is in music, or not music. She's in like business and marketing school. And she's like, Dad, I'm learning all this stuff for my business and I have to come shadow someone. Can I come shadow you? And so she comes in and she's like 20 years old and she's like trying to tell the employees what to do. She's like, well, my textbook says we need to do this. And this is how we resolve stuff. And the lesson at the end of the episode is Tim Allen goes to her and says, he's like, look, you can read lots of books, but there comes a point where you just can't replace experience and just having to make decisions and just kind of knowing in your gut. And I was like, oh my gosh, that really resonated with me.
Well, and I think, really briefly to touch on, like when you say, what's my best decision? I don't think I can really point to a single best decision. I think it's more a series of decisions. And I think a lot of it comes from more of a mindset and value system of, when I don't know something, I'm going to seek out people who do, who might know better than me. But then I'm also going to make decisions that align with my values. And when I make a good decision or a bad decision, I'm going to learn from it and keep adjusting. So to me, I think the biggest decision you could say is more the mindset of continuing to grow and refine. And when I make a decision, to own it and admit to it. And when I make a good decision, to understand, well, what led to me making that good decision so I can make more of them.
I would agree. I would say the same thing for me, which is just the ability to continually refine what we're doing, always be open to learning and being more willing to listen to ourselves now. But yeah, it's kind of an ongoing process.
Correct.
For sure. Well, dude, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody where they can find you. Although if you're a student of ours or a prospective student of ours, don't listen to anything he says right now.
No, because I'm going to steal students away from Earth. I'm going to try to destroy Eric. No, Eric is great. If you're a current student, prospective student, like Eric is fantastic. If you happen to live in the Troy, Michigan area, or if you're interested in Zoom lessons, we teach piano, voice, guitar. We also do some ukulele and bass lessons. You can go to JROPRO.com. That's JROPRO.com to schedule a free assessment.
And I would encourage everyone, take a free Zoom assessment with his school and with my music school, and then tell us who won. help us keep some friendly competition going and keep us on our toes. All right, yes. Josh. Well, man, as always, it's so good to talk to you. Tell Leah I said hi, and I look forward to hopefully meeting Xavier, because we'll be back up in Michigan at some point. My sister lives in Saginaw, or up near Saginaw. In Oscoda, so we'll have to. I'll let you know when we're passing through.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, I'll talk to you later, Eric. Thank you.
All right, dude. Bye.